05:12 local time, Northern Arabian Sea. Inside the Combat Information Center of a United States Navy aircraft carrier, the radar screen looks routine. Merchant ships drift slowly across the horizon. The ocean is calm. Then one console flashes. A radar operator leans forward. New contact, 90 nautical miles. Seconds later, another signal appears. Then another. Then a fourth. 4 aircraft now moving together across open water. Low altitude, high speed, no transponders. Electronic sensors begin comparing radar signatures. F4, Phantom, F-14, Tomcat, Su-24 strike aircraft, and several miles behind them, a drone. The formation is not random. It looks deliberate, and it is flying straight toward a USS carrier strike group. At first, no one says anything, because everyone in the room is thinking the same thing. If those aircraft keep coming, this quiet morning could turn dangerous very quickly. So the real question now is simple. Are they testing the fleet or preparing to strike? 05:13 local time. Across the carrier strike group, the radar picture sharpens. Every ship in the formation now sees the same 4 contacts moving across the Northern Arabian Sea. Data flows instantly through the fleet network. Destroyers, cruisers, and the carrier share the same tactical display. The formation begins to make sense. The F-4 Phantom flies slightly ahead of the others, acting as the forward fighter. Older, but still fast enough to challenge any aircraft approaching the formation. Behind it, the F-14 Tomcat holds a higher altitude. Its large radar sweeps across the ocean surface, searching far beyond the horizon. Lower over the water, the Su-24 Fencer cuts through the morning air. Heavy and fast, the aircraft stays close to the sea where radar returns are harder to track. And several miles behind them, a small drone circles quietly. 4 aircraft, 4 different roles. Escort, radar control, strike platform, reconnaissance. Inside the carrier's Combat Information Center, the tactical officer studies the closing distance. 70 miles. At that range, every movement matters. Destroyers surrounding the carrier begin adjusting their radar sectors. The Aegis combat systems track the approaching aircraft automatically, updating their position hundreds of times each minute. Above the fleet, an E-2 Hawkeye early warning aircraft scans the surrounding airspace with its rotating radar dome. And on the flight deck below, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets sit ready on alert, pilots already inside their cockpits, engines prepared to start within seconds. Inside the CIC, the room remains quiet, because the aircraft are still coming. 60 miles, no radio calls, no identification. Just 4 radar contacts moving steadily closer to the most powerful naval formation in the region. And with every mile that disappears between them, the situation becomes a little more uncertain. 05:16 local time. Inside the carrier's Combat Information Center, the radar picture suddenly changes. A new signal appears on the electronic warfare console. Narrowband emission detected. The operator leans closer to the display. This is not a search radar. The signal is tighter, focused, fire control radar. On the tactical screen, the symbol beside the F-14 Tomcat changes color. Its radar beam sharpens, locking directly onto the carrier strike group. For the first time since the encounter began, the situation shifts from observation to targeting. Behind the Tomcat, the Su-24 drops even lower, barely 1,000 feet above the ocean surface. Its flight path stabilizes as if aligning with a possible strike corridor. The F-4 Phantom slides slightly to the side, creating space in front of the formation. Inside the CIC, the range counter continues falling. 50 miles, 47, 45. Then, the radar operator calls out, "New contact, fast moving." A small track suddenly appears on the screen, racing away from the Iranian formation. Speed increasing rapidly. The room goes quiet. On the large tactical display, a thin line stretches across the map toward the carrier strike group. Radar operators watch carefully as the contact accelerates across the ocean. It could be debris, it could be electronic interference, or it could be something else entirely. Inside the carrier, electronic warfare systems activate almost immediately. Powerful transmitters begin sending waves of interference into the sky, filling the airspace between the fleet and the incoming track. On the radar screen, the contact begins to wobble. The track shifts slightly left, then right. For several seconds it continues forward. Then, slowly, the signal fades. No impact. Just empty ocean. But the aircraft that triggered the alarm are still there, and they are still flying toward the fleet. 05:19 local time. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar picture remains tense but controlled. The unidentified contact has disappeared, but the 4 aircraft are still approaching. Distance: 35 nautical miles. High above the carrier, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets burst into the morning sky from the flight deck. Within seconds, they begin climbing hard toward the approaching formation. Inside the cockpit of the lead Hornet, the radar display quickly fills with 3 clear targets and 1 smaller signal, F-4. Phantom, F-14 Tomcat, Su-24 strike aircraft, and the drone circling behind them. The pilot steadies the aircraft and locks his radar onto the leading fighter. A sharp warning tone immediately echoes inside the Iranian cockpit. Radar lock. Moments later, the crew inside the F-14 Tomcat receives the same warning. 2 separate radar beams now track the formation from above. Inside the carrier strike group, every radar in the fleet watches the geometry change. The approaching formation now has American fighters above them and multiple ships tracking them from below. For several seconds, the aircraft continue forward. Then, something changes. The Su-24 begins to climb slightly, lifting away from the low-altitude attack profile it had been holding over the ocean surface. Inside the CIC, one of the radar operators notices it first. Bomber increasing altitude. A few seconds later, the F-4 Phantom adjusts its heading. Then, the F-14 Tomcat follows. The formation that had been moving directly toward the carrier strike group slowly begins turning east. Above them, the 2 Super Hornets maintain position just long enough to confirm the maneuver. No missiles are launched, no dogfight begins. The aircraft simply continue turning away across the open ocean. 05:23 local time. On the tactical display inside the carrier's Combat Information Center, the 4 radar contacts slowly begin shrinking as they move east across the Northern Arabian Sea. Distance increasing: 30 miles, 35, 40. The encounter that had been building for more than 10 minutes begins to fade just as quietly as it started. Inside the CIC, the watch team continues tracking the aircraft for several minutes longer. Radar signals, communication frequencies, and electronic emissions from the formation are automatically recorded and stored for later analysis. Encounters like this rarely make headlines. Aircraft approach. Defenses respond. Both sides observe carefully without crossing the final line into open conflict. Outside, the carrier strike group continues its steady course across calm water. On the flight deck, the 2 Super Hornets descend back toward the ship and prepare to land. No explosions, no wreckage, just another tense moment at sea that ends the way many of them do, with both sides turning away before the situation goes any further. And somewhere inside the Navy's intelligence systems, the data from this quiet encounter will be studied long after the aircraft disappear from radar.